Gift wrap, of course, is off the plan that will dictate the future shape of our largest city. 1 in 3 people live here, Auckland. And it's revealed more higher density housing across the city than previously talked about. And that was vociferously rejected by some people back in February. We're joined now in the studio by our Auckland correspondent, Todd Niall. Todd, can you take us through the main points as you see them?
Yeah, so the plan as it's come back from the hearings panel to the council is much more pumped up than the plan that went in 3 years ago. So basically when the plan went in 3 years ago, the calculation was that realistically it would create, space for another 213,000 dwellings. The panel has decided that it needs to do far more, that it has to zone Auckland from next week for what is going to be needed in 24 years' time when the extra million people or so over are here. So they've come up with a plan that creates zoning for 422,000 extra houses. And they're keeping that balance that the council wanted between 30 to 40% outside the urban boundary, 60-70% inside. So that balance remains the same, but it's much more pumped up. And the big move is really the increase in the size of the higher density housing zones and also the increase in what you can actually do within those zones.
Okay, so let's talk about the increase in what you can do within those zones. So what goes now that didn't go before? And bear in mind, before was rejected by people in many communities, right?
Yeah, so two parts to that equation. If you take, for example, the mixed house urban zone, that's one of the higher ones, townhouses, apartments, up to 3 stories. 3 years ago, that was going to cover 10% of Auckland. Now it's going to cover nearly 20% of Auckland. So that's a much bigger zone. Within a lot of that zone, there were going to be regulations saying, you could have 1 dwelling for every 200 square metres of land. All that's gone. So instead of having a site where you might have had 4 townhouses under that rule, a clever developer with good design could maybe get, 8 or 9, put more 1-bedrooms into the site, a mix of 1 and 2s. So more higher density zones and more that you can do within them.
The shorthand for the suburbs, I think, that are going to be most upset about this, potentially, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, is leafy suburbs. That's always the way they're described. And they had all sorts of protections. And one of them was a sort of pre-1944 protection. In other words, it was the character that was being preserved. What's happened to that?
Yeah, so the leafy suburbs, if you like, have lost out in 2 ways. And this plan affects all of Auckland, but a lot of the political activity was in the better off, more established suburbs. So there was going to be, for some of those areas, Westmere, Grey Lynn, where there were large communities of pre-1944 houses, a sort of a layer of protection across those. Not absolute, but it would slow down development, and that's all gone. The panel said no grounds to have that, get rid of that. You can do whatever your zoning allows, 2-story, 3-story townhouses. So that's gone. But also when you look, in February there was a revolt in the eastern suburbs, Mission Bay, Koimaramas and Heliers that provoked a bit of a political revolt in the council. Those suburbs are also much more highly zoned now than even when they were in February. So what they rebelled against in February, the panel has delivered more. Almost all of the single house in Mission Bay, Koimarama is gone.
I don't want to sound facetious, but they're going to start feeling nostalgic for February now, aren't they, those communities?
Well, they may do, but then the end result was probably always going to be the same, regardless of what was going on at half time.
Okay, so what happens now? Because what can the council do?
The council has the right, in theory, and that will start on August the 10th, over a period of 6 or 7 days to debate this and decide whether or not to accept it. In reality, though, the magnitude of making significant change is so great, it's probably going to be very difficult. They've got a statutory deadline to deliver this plan by August 19. If they want to change something, they've got to justify it, they've got to propose an alternative, they're exposed to Environment Court appeals, and none of that is going to go down well with the government.
The Minister could potentially extend that period, couldn't he? But we're starting to get really close to local body elections, aren't we?
Yeah, and the Minister said yesterday he wouldn't say absolutely no, I will not extend it, but he made it very clear that was not at all his preference, and he did not want that debate extending further and further towards the October 8 local body elections.
Yeah, OK, we're going to hear from some of the mayoral candidates in a moment, but what do you think? What's your pick? I mean, you followed this so closely. What do you think will happen?
Well, I'm not sure. There will be a lot of political theatrics. I mean, this is the last chance chance. There are a lot of councillors who were dead against some of this intensification. They will need to perform well for their voters, if for no other reason. There will be a lot of political theatre, but it is actually hard to see the ability to significantly change the plan as it is today.
Todd Niall, our Auckland correspondent. Thank you so much, Todd.